Hey everybody. All right. Why is this so dark? Okay, so tonight we'll be doing hatching and cross hatching. We're not going to be doing a separate hatching and a separate cross hatching drawing. We're just going to be doing both hatching and cross hatching on a single image. So the process for this is going to look very, very similar to when we're doing charcoal. In fact, it's going to be exactly the same. We're going to do the same loose gesture, block in with the head, mass of the ribs, pelvis, action lines of the arms and legs, building out our volumes with more specific shapes, breaking those specific shapes up into even more specific shapes, and then finally going in and finding our shadows and highlights, outlining those, and then filling them in just like we would do with charcoal, only we're going to be doing it with smooth passages of hatched value with graphite. So we will be using graphite pencils. I have a lead holder here that has my 2B, and then I have a 4B and a 6B. For you guys, use your full range. Start with your 2H and work your way up in hardnesses from there, or down in hardnesses, I guess I should say. So do your initial planning, everything from the initial gesture to your volumes, to your specific shapes, to your outlining of your shadow shapes and highlight shapes. Do all of that with your 2H graphite pencil. Reason being is because that'll be very, very hard and very, very light mark making. So that way you don't have to worry about those showing up in your final image. And then once you have all that, you're done with the 2H, and then move on to your HB for your initial pass. And you're basically going to be working from HB towards your softest, which is 8B. So HB is like your middle. Then it'll be 2B, 4B, 6B, and then 8B. Those, as you all surely know from drawing, will get softer. And because they're softer, they will be darker. So work your way up through those hardnesses, or those softnesses rather, to the very, very end. No white chalk with this one. It's only going to be graphite and your paper. So yeah. But with that, let's go ahead and get started. So I'll find my top of my camera, bottom, and just to quickly go over. So I'll do it right up here. So we have HB that's in the middle. Then we have 2B, 4B, 6B, and then we have a 2H. So what this means is when you go this direction, you get harder. The material of your pencil gets harder. And what that means is less material comes off when you draw, so therefore it becomes lighter. This is in the middle, HB, and then when you go this way, it's the opposite. So the 2Bs, as you go into the Bs are softer. And because they are softer, more material comes off of the lead when you're drawing, so they become darker as well. Again, higher number, the softer and darker it is. Higher the number, the harder and the lighter it is, with HB being in the middle. So you're going to do all of your initial drawing stage, all of your planning, like I said, from gesture to the planning out of your shadow shapes with your 2H. Then you're going to fill in your first passage of shadow with HB, second passage with 2B, 4B, 6B, etc. Okay? 6B, etc. I'm going to grab my 2H real quick because I might actually use it now that I think about it. Okay. And just for example, the reason I'm not going to be starting with my 2H is because of that. You can barely see that on the camera. So it's kind of pointless to do that for the demo. Because it'll look like I'm doing nothing for a while. But when I do my initial shading pass with my pencils, I will use the 2H because then I can work all the way up to the highlight and use my 2H for the midtones all the way out. So, okay. Let's do a new sheet. We'll just do the back of that sheet. Okay. All right. And I'm coming in this cold, really. I would suggest doing gestures first to kind of warm up. It's gonna look weird for a second. I would suggest doing gestures first to warm up and then come in and do your actual drawing. It'll make things worlds easier. Sorry for that little adjustment. Make things worlds easier when it comes to figuring out your proportions and everything. All right, so he has one leg coming down here. Really foreshortened front leg here with foot. Foot's kind of curled in, paddle the feet there. This leg comes out there. I'm just doing some angle measurements here. The feet kind of meet up at the same spot. That paddle, and then we have one arm down here, one arm there, into the hands, something like that. So gesture's done, okay? So now I'm gonna go in and start working on my specific forms. All right, so we'll get a little bit cleaner on the head. Basically, I'm taking my quick gesture and I'm gonna do a clean mannequin, and then I'll start putting on features. Pretty much, like, the only detail I might add in right now are the pants, the fact that he's wearing jeans and he has a belt on, because that gives a little bit of structure to the waist here. And then the hair. I'll probably block out the shape of the hair, but for the most part, I'm ignoring features or specifics right now because I just want those main basic forms. And again, as with everything, we start with that head. And again, I'm going much darker than I would suggest you guys go. only reason I'm going this dark this quick with these lines is I want you to be able to see them on the screen. Otherwise, go as light as you possibly can with this while still being able to keep track of what you're doing. It'll save you in the long run because you won't have to be fighting your outlines or having to go back and erase your outlines once you get into your value stage. So again, only going this dark for the demo so that you'll actually be able to see what I'm doing. I want to reiterate that so no one gets lost and starts drawing super dark and then wondering why, they can't get it to look like the demo or whatever. I'm going to change the angle of the face here because I was noticing it was a little too shallow. And much like with the charcoal, because I'm drawing so dark, I will do a ghost image of this. I'll take my eraser and kind of rub off a little bit of this value just so, I can clean it up slightly. But I don't want to do it so much that it's going to be hard to read. And I don't suggest you do it that much unless you got really, really dark on some of your lines. For the hands here, since they're so small, I'm just going to break them up into kind of basic hand shape for right now. Heavy foreshortening on this leg right here. It's a good challenge. If you find a reference like that and you want to try to tackle it, go for it. It's a good challenge to give this sort of thing a shot. This extreme foreshortening. All right, something like that. So now I'm gonna do my ghost. And while I'm doing the ghost, I'm going to try to get rid of some of the construction lines from before and just really clean up the drawing. All right. So I'm going to go in with a mechanical pencil and really get these details nice and clean with thin line. Okay. Starting with the head. And I'm not sure how much for the demo that I want to do. I don't want to, just sit here and hatch and render this whole thing all night. You'll get the idea probably about halfway through. So try not to give you like a 4-hour demo, but we'll see how long this goes. I'm going to try to stick to like an hour and a half or so. But we'll see. So now here I'm going for the specific detail. I'm just kind of undulating my mark. Something like that. Down. But exactly the same stuff that we would have done with any of the other projects. Nothing really special here. Only difference is we're changing the medium up and we're doing fully graphite with this one. But otherwise, exactly the same as any of the other projects that we've done in terms of constructing the image and getting your proportions down and everything like that. It's all the same. Moving this arm over and thinning it out just a little bit. Don't like the tangent that's happening right here with the necklace. So I'm going to push the necklace up slightly. Go from there. Sorry, I keep bumping the camera with my head. You can see I'm making some minor adjustments to my previous pass, which again, like I always say, every stage is an opportunity to restate and check your work from the previous stages to make sure you didn't miss anything. Because we all do. We all need to make adjustments. So make those adjustments and then move on. Don't be, even though I know sometimes these stages can take a while to go through, don't be precious about anything that you've done, right? Like, really consider every little bit as malleable until you start adding value, and even then, you can still change stuff, even at those later stages. All right, I'm gonna ignore the little ankle bracelet that he has just because I don't like having a line going straight across anything, especially one that's small. Okay, so now, once again, I'm gonna do a slight pass, mainly to clean up my construction lines, but also to give myself a little bit of a ghost image of this pencil. All right. So now we're going to go with the 2H. You might not be able to see what I'm doing with this, but trust me, I'm putting down a value, or I'm blocking out my values. So again, as always, if you have any questions though, let me know. I'll walk you through what I'm thinking as I'm doing this. So first things first is the initial separation of light and shadow. And some of these, because like things like in the head are very small, I'm going to simplify some of these shadows, really squint down and look at them. That way I'm not bogged down by all the detail. And then later on, if I get to it, I can get in and go for all the little tiny, tiny shadows happening within here. But for the most part, I'm just going to go for the big stuff. Squinting, looking at the shadows, and just picking out all the important things that are popping out to me. Again, just like any other drawing we've done this semester. I'm going to ignore the veins for right now, even though they're a pretty prominent structure on the arms. Again, I just want to squint and go for, sorry, bump the camera again, squint and go for the very general shadows first. Those veins are just little erased details that I can go in later and just kind of pull out with my eraser. So I'm not super worried about saving those at this stage. Again, I want to simplify some of the shadows in the hands and in the small features. The pants are pretty much just going to be black, I think. Even though there's a little bit of value differentiation here. There's not much. So there's only going to be probably a couple areas on the pants that aren't just pure black. Like this whole section is going to be pure black. And the foot. And then this foot. Something like that. And then the shadows of the chest. And then these shadows of the rib cage right here. This is actually, so this looks like the rib cage, but digging into the muscles right here, this is actually the serratus anterior seam. So these are muscles, not the ribs. They are finger-like muscles that weave in and out of the ribs, but they're not the ribs themselves. And those go down into the external obliques over here. Like so. All right. Something like that. Again, you can't really see much what I've done, but if I zoom in a little bit. You can kind of see all the little shadow shapes I've planned out here. So I'm going to take... All right. All right, I'm going to take a real quick break because my stool is making my legs go numb. And then when I get back, we're going to start filling in all these shadow shapes with our HB, or 2H rather, and then move our way through to HB, 2B, 4B, and probably we'll stop on 4B. I don't think we need to go past 4B really, but anyway, I'm going to take like a 5-minute break, and then we'll be back to do the values. So hang tight. All right, I'm back. Okay. So now, I'm going to go in with my 2H, and I'm not going to actually work in the shadows. I'm going to work in the midtones. So the areas around the highlights. And I'm going to use this and hatch across into the shadow shape. So I'm going to zoom in so you can actually see what I'm doing in the face here. And then I'll zoom out as I finish the rest of the body so you can kind of see that process as a whole. But I want you to be able to see it close up. So we just bring this down here. I know it's blurry, just bear with me for a second. There we go. Okay. So, if I'm looking here, I see in this area right here, there's highlight, and that meets up with the highlight on the nose right there. But then everything else on this side is midtone. There's a little bit of midtone, or a little bit of highlight, on the underside of the nose right there. Everything else is midtone, highlight on the lip right here. Everything else is midtone, and that's pretty much it. So, what I'm going to do, and there's actually a little shadow that I missed underneath the eye here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start hatching away. So I'll go one direction first. And you can see I'm not really being careful because I know I'm going to go over this section with darker values. So I can just kind of hatch into that freely. And even doing so, like doing this, or doing this hatching like this, will allow it to blend a little bit better because I'm already putting value in that area. So it's just like paint meeting up with paint. Those two surfaces will start to blend a little bit, right? Since I'm in these little delicate areas, I can go ahead and actually drop in some darker shadows. I'm just kind of playing around here. Okay, I'm going to switch a direction. Because again, the goal is to get smooth value, but I don't want you to blend, okay? Don't go in here and just like put a little bit of value down and then blend it out. Or don't do that. Don't use your blending stumps, none of that. Soften and blend by doing more layers of your cross hatching, okay? Because the more you do it, the less paper will show through and the better looking it all becomes. Now there, I missed a little bit of a highlight. I hatched over a little bit of a highlight, so I'm just going to go in with my kneaded eraser and bring that back out. Okay. That's pretty much it, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do that all the way down the midtones, and then we'll zoom back in, and I will... or zoom back out rather, and I'll go ahead and do all that for the rest of the form. And you can see I'm holding my pencil way at the end here. That way I don't choke up and press really, really hard with this. I want this to be nice, light, delicate cross-hatching and delicate value. So I'm just kind of letting the weight of the pencil do the work, and I'm just holding it very, very far back so that I can't bear down on it and do a lot of pressure. that. All right. So that's enough just to knock back the midtones and leave room for the highlights. So now we're going to jump to my actual 2B, which is going to be this one. It's not very pointed. Let me see if I can do something about that real quick. All right. Quick pass with the X-Acto knife, and I got a nice pointed pencil. So now this is where I'm going to actually do my shadow pass. So before I was just working in the midtones. I wasn't really focused on shadows at all. By design, I just wanted to go ahead and work from my highlight out. It's a little bit opposite of the way we would normally work, but I think it helps with this to kind of key down your light mask so you don't go too dark with your shadows. You don't have to do it that way. You could do it your normal traditional way where you fill in all your shadows, then go to the lights, then go to the shadows, then go to your lights. But no harm with this one to show you something a little bit different. So now I'm going to go in with the 2B and I'm going to do that initial shadow pass where I make all the shadows one unified value, okay? The hair's a little bit tedious because there's all these little curls and stuff that I did on the outer edge. So I'm just kind of following those curls with simple hashing. And then once I get into the middle here, I can just do a big fill in. All right. I'm on the side of my pencil here, so I'm getting a nice wide mark for these areas. And it's letting me get a really smooth tone fairly easily. Here with these smaller areas, I'm going up on the point, just so there's a little bit more precision. While I'm here, just so they're so small, I'm gonna go ahead and throw in the darkest darks in the face as well. Just because, again, they're so small that I don't really need to go for the full value pass before coming back to here. And this way I can kind of like set it and forget it with the face. I can just sort of commit to what I have here and just move on. And I will come back to the face, or at least the head for the hair in a little bit. So it will be a chance. I will have a chance to revisit this area, but I don't think I'm gonna really go for anything new in this area, other than what I already have here. Because again, I'm squinting and I'm only looking for the big things that I see. So, all right, continuing down the neck. Or actually, hold on. My bad. Forgot the ear. Clean these up a little bit. I'm just working my way around, filling in these shadow shapes. And one thing I'll say, like, as I always kind of mention, don't get too lost in what you've already done. Look back at your reference and apply your values from that. Just use your shadow outlines as a guide more than anything. Like, they're not law, right? You want to still give yourself the opportunity to change things up as you're moving forward. Okay. I'm going to jump back to my 2H really fast. And I'm going to use this to start to blend some edges together. Okay. So I'm just going to hatch across these edges between the midtones and the shadows. And just apply a little bit of value to soften these through. Okay. So I'm going to go in and start to carve out my darker darks. Again, I'm still going to be using my 2B here because I have plenty of room, as you can see, to go darker with the 2B. So the first thing we'll do is we'll jump back up into the hair. And now I'm changing the value with the 2B with pressure. I could have just as easily jumped up here with the 4B and gone through and did this pass with the 4B. Both methods work. I'm just doing it this way because it's a little bit more efficient for me to not change pencils and dig through my pencil box over here. For you guys, do whatever makes you feel comfortable. Because neither way is really wrong. But the easier way is just to say, oh, I need to go darker. Let me grab a softer pencil. Okay. If you try to like mess with pressure too much, you might fall into the trap of starting to press too hard on certain aspects, and you'll lose a little bit of control there. Whereas if you know you need to go darker and you just keep the same pressure with your pencil and just change the pencil, that might be more beneficial to you, just because you'll regain that control and you won't have to worry about pressure sensitivity. That said, if you're really comfortable with graphite, go for it. Give it a shot, why not? It's always good to challenge yourself with these sort of things. So, all right, now let's carve out some darker darks. I'm just going to work my way down, carving out those dark darks. Now, as I'm carving out these darker darks, I'm actually going to start leaving some areas where I'm going to erase out the veins that are happening in the arm here. So I don't want to put too much heavy value there because I know I'm going to come back in and detail out some veins. Also, just in applying value, I'm going to skip over some spots to start implying the veins that are happening in the arm, as you can probably see already. That's a little too dark, I think, in the arm, just looking at the reference. So I'm going to lift that out. Put my value back in. That's a little bit better. Subtlety, 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 subtlety. All right. Jump to the other arm. So we have the clavicle right here. And I'm just finding my darker accents and just working my way out from those. Much like when we're working additively with the highlights, where we start with the brightest point and then feather out. That's what I'm doing here. I'm starting with my darkest point and blending it out into the rest of the shadow. That way it gives me my dark accent that I'm looking for, but then unifies with the rest of the shadow. You don't want it to just be this like little floating island in the middle of nowhere of this shadow, right? You want it to actually be tied into the group of the shadow, but still serve as the accents. You want that middle point where it blends in, becomes part of the whole, but it still stands out and gives you the accent that you need. It's a little bit of a balancing act. But when in doubt, unify your shadows. Keep them unified. Don't let them get separated to the point where you become like... Don't let them get separated to the point where it looks like your figure has like spots all over them, right? You want the shadows to all join together and become one shadow shape that shows the overall form, right? And then you can get into the details a little bit and describe specific forms with the darker shadows, but you never, ever, ever want to lose that main shadow form, that main unification of that shadow. Because once you've lost that, you've lost the entire readability of your image. I don't care how well rendered it is. I don't care how, quote unquote, hyper realistic or photographic or whatever, dumb term you want to put on your drawing. If you have lost your overall value structure, you have created a terrible drawing because it's going to be completely unreadable. It's just going to be chaos to the viewer's eyes. And the second that the viewer sees chaos that they can't make any sense of, generally speaking, unless the work is specifically about chaos, Generally speaking, if the composition can't hold them and the values can't hold them, the viewer will just walk away. They'll just be like, oh, okay, and then move on to the next piece, right? You want to hold their attention, so you don't want it to be overly bogged down with detail. You want there to be some, so they have enough to look at, but you also don't want it to get so complicated and so lost that they can't make sense of it. There's like a little bit of a middle ground. You want to challenge the viewer just enough that they're interested, but not so much that they have no way in on viewing your work. You want to always give your viewer a way into viewing your artwork. When it's too heavily detailed or when the overall structure is lost, generally what happens is there's no way in because there's too much chaos going on. Nothing is united and nothing gives that like solid sort of intentional front. Again, this isn't always the case. If you make abstract artwork that is about the chaos, then you can work some way into the piece that will allow the viewer to enter and interact with the piece on an intellectual level. But for like naturalistic drawing, like what we're doing here with figures, it's really, really hard to get a viewer's attention if there's nothing for them to anchor on that makes sense. And the way that you do that, you make sure that your values are unified. Again, still keep all your details and everything like that, but they all need to be part of a unified whole. WHOLE. Something like that. The whites on the eye were standing out too much. All right. I'm going to jump to my 4B for the pants. So what I'll do with the pants is I'm going to get this light shadow in first. And then I'm going to go full pressure for the rest of the pants. And not light shadow. I don't know why I said that. The lighter portion of the jean, the like light mass of the pants, is what I'm going to do first. And then I can go full pressure. You could do the opposite. You could go full pressure first, which also is fine, but rotate my paper slightly. All right. Okay, I'm going to go in with my 2H now on top of the black pants, and it's not going to do much to darken it, but what it will do is it'll fill in all these little white gaps that are there with the 2H value, and almost act like a little bit of a blending stump without actually blending, and just darken down everything, smooth it together, and again, that our golden word, unify all this dark mass. Missed a little spot right here. But yeah, unifying all this dark mass, super important. But you can see it's not really doing much to change the value other than filling in that all the white areas. Back to the 2H. Actually coming to a close here soon. Just kind of finishing up these feet. Just throwing in a couple little accent marks here. Just with the 2H, so they're nice and thin, don't get too bogged down. Something like that. Let's see. A couple little darker sections in here that I can pull out. Nothing too major. And then we'll go to the kneaded eraser where I put that. And I'm going to start going in for these veins, specifically just on this arm. And to do that, I'm pinching into a blade like this. You know, I can't really get a good point that's going to erase these well. So what I like to do is pinch the kneaded eraser to form like a little thin, like knife edge almost like that. And I'll kind of go along that knife edge and get a very thin erased mark. Like that. Along those lines. That's pretty much it for the hatching and cross hatching. Again, it is very, very similar to any of the other drawing methods we've practiced. And if you want, you could go in. If you have something like this where this guy's on a chair, you could go in and it might help it to kind of hatch in and add value to the shadow side of the chair legs. Just so he's not floating. Something like that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So treat it just like any other drawing. Follow the exact same processes that we've done with all the other drawings up until now. In terms of how you structure the form, how you break up the form into different specific shapes, all that stuff. The whole process stays exactly the same. The only difference is you're doing it with graphite and you're hatching without blending. That's the only difference. The medium and the technique are different, but otherwise, the actual method for getting your figure onto your paper is exactly the same. So to recap, use your 2H to do your gesture, get your proportions, block in your main volumes, break those volumes up into specific shapes to start getting the character, and then break those up into even more specific shapes to get exactly the character of this. Once you have that, clean it up, get a ghost image, etc. Make sure you can still see your lines, but they're very, very light. And then go in and find all of your cast and form shadows and all your highlights, okay? Then, starting with your 2H, start filling in the midtones and shadows and unifying those through. Then once you've done that entire pass over your entire drawing, filling all of your midtones and shadows with your 2H lightly, then go in with your 2B, or HB rather, sorry. Then go in with your HB and then just focus on the shadow shapes. Do a pass of the shadow shapes. Then when you're done with your shadow shapes, again, a full pass, jump to your 2B, go for your darker accents. Do a whole pass of that, darker accents. Then jump to your 4B, go for even darker accents still. And depending on your figure and what you're doing, you might stop at the 4B, you might continue on, but it's the same process. Go for little accents and just do your whole pass of each, then move to the next pencil. Now, that sounds like a lot of drawing, right? But what you have to realize is all of it's front loaded, okay? So what that means is as you're drawing, you're gonna spend the bulk of your time on getting your proportions, drawing your figure, getting it placed, finding all your shadow shapes, finding all your highlight shapes, etc. Then you'll spend a little less time when you're coloring it in, basically, quote unquote, coloring it in. And then when you're coloring it in, you're only working on the shadow areas, right? The light stays the white of the paper. Then when you jump to your HB, you're working on an even smaller area still, just the shadows, right? Then when you jump to your 2B, you're working on an even smaller area still, just your darker portions of the shadow. You're not going over the whole shadow again. You're just working in these small little areas to darken them down and unify them with the whole. Same thing with the 4B, you get even smaller still. So I like to think of it like a mountain, right? You just get smaller and smaller portions. So, for example, off to the side, or we'll do it on the back of this. So back to our other page. So I like to think of it like a mountain, right? Where this big base, So the bulk of your time is spent down here, which is your gesture, your proportions, and your specific gesture, proportions, specific forms, and then finding your highlight and cast / form shadow shapes, right? Then what you do is you do a smaller one where you're just filling in your 2H, filling in the mid and shadow tones. Then, as you go up, you're in the HB, just in the shadows. Then you go to your 2B, and you see, as we move up, you're drawing in a smaller and smaller area, right? We're going to the peak of the mountain. 2B, darker shadows. 4B, darker still. And then at the very, very end, 6B are like your very, very dark line accents, right? But you can see, even though you're doing full passes on your drawing, right? You're technically speaking, you're working on the entire drawing at every single stage. What you're actually working on is a ever decreasing area of the drawing, right? So you're just working on smaller and smaller bits as you go forward. So yes, you're doing multiple passes, but those passes are getting smaller and smaller as you go for your darker accents. So yes, it sounds like a lot, but don't get bogged down. Follow the process, and I think you'll be surprised how fast it actually goes. It also depends on what subject you've chosen. This is a pretty hard subject. There's a lot I can still do in here to really carve out shadows, but I'd be just kind of going in and just doing like the, little finicky details going through there. I don't really need to do that for the demo. You guys get the idea. But there's more to do here still, with unifying the shadows, making sure that the value relationship is correct. But for the most part, this is good for a demo, for at least. So, yeah. If you have a simpler figure, a simpler shadow pattern, obviously the hatching and cross hatching is going to be much more simple for you. But that's it for the demo. Oop. Where did he go? I don't know what happened to him. Anyway, all right. I don't know what happened to the reference, but this is the demo. Let me know if you have any questions, but that's it for the stream. So I will post this on Wednesday like normal, and then go from there. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. If you want feedback on it as you're working on it, again, feel free to email me. But otherwise, thanks for watching, and have a good night. If you're watching this live, go vote if you haven't already. Kind of an important election. But yeah, go vote. Happy drawing, and I will catch you next time. Bye-bye.